Hello. Tonight, we begin with the most fascinating fairy tale. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. By the Almshouse Window, near the old grass-covered rampart that encircles Copenhagen, there stands a large red house. Its bricks are faded with age and weather, yet the windows bloom with life. Rows of balsams, geraniums, and tiny pots of ivy spill over the ledges, greeting the passerby with soft colors and a faint scent of soil and sunlight. Within, however, the brightness of the flowers is at odds with the rooms they adorn. The walls are bare. The furniture is meager and worn by long use. Poverty has taken root there, but so too has patience and quiet endurance. The building is known as the Wharton Almshouse, a refuge for those who have outlived both fortune and family. At one of those windows leans an old maid. Her hair, once golden perhaps, is now silvered, neatly parted beneath a small lace cap. She plucks a withered leaf from her balsam and lets it fall. Her gaze drifts outward to the green rampart where the grass sways in the sea breeze and where a troop of children are playing in the sun. Their laughter rises like birdsong into the still afternoon air. What is she thinking of, this solitary watcher behind the flowers? A whole drama of life unfolds silently before her, one she knows too well, for it is her own. The children below, how light their spirits are. They tumble and chase one another through the grass, their voices clear as bells. Their cheeks are red as apples, their eyes bright as spring water. Yet their feet are bare, and their garments are patched and thin. Still, they laugh as though the earth were heaven. They dance on that very patch of rampart where, long ago, the ground was said to sink and tremble. For there, so the old tale tells, a playful child was lured with flowers and sweets toward an open grave. When the earth closed again over that tiny form, the soil grew firm, and never since has it yielded. The story whispers through the generations, though few remember it now. The little ones who dance above that quiet grave know nothing of it. Had they known, they might imagine they heard a faint cry beneath their feet, and they might think the morning dew were tears from the child below. Nor do they know of the king, the brave Danish king who once stood upon that same rampart before the face of his trembling courtiers. With the enemy pressing near, he raised his sword and swore he would hold the city with its citizens, and, if need be, perish there within his nest. They know nothing of the soldiers who fell upon this ground, nor of the women who from those windows poured boiling water upon white-clad foes hiding in the snow. Time has softened the cries of battle into the laughter of children. Play on, little ones, play on, for life's hours of joy are few, and they pass like the drifting clouds over the city towers. See, among them runs a fair-haired girl, her laughter clear as a bell. Soon the years will come. Yes, those radiant years of youth that shine like a brief summer evening before the dusk of toil and sorrow. The day will come when priestly hands rest upon the heads of the young for confirmation. Then she too will walk proudly on the rampart, her white frock fluttering in the wind. Her mother has spent many a night by the dim lamp sewing that dress, not new cloth, but carefully cut down from one long forgotten in a chest. A red shawl, large and too long for her slight frame, is thrown about her shoulders, yet she feels as grand as a princess. Around her, the bells ring from every steeple, and the air smells of budding lilac and spring rain. Her heart is full of innocent dreams and whispered prayers. Oh, how beautiful life seems on the green rampart then. The years roll forward, bearing laughter and tears in equal measure. There are dark days, yes, many, but her heart is brave and her faith steadfast. And there, without knowing quite when or how, she finds a friend. Their paths cross often, as if by chance. Together, they walk that same rampart when the days grow long and the air is heavy with the scent of lilacs. They talk of nothing, and yet of everything. The city glows golden in the distance. The world seems wide and waiting. The heart is young, and to be young is to believe that joy will last forever. Each spring, the same tree stands near the castle of Rosenborg, the first to unfold its tender green buds. Every year, new leaves appear, bright and full of life. But the human heart does not renew so easily. Shadows gather there that no sun can wholly dispel. Clouds heavier than the northern mists drift through its chambers. For our maiden, love blooms and fades. Her friend, her heart's chosen one, falls ill and dies. His bridal chamber is a coffin of black wood. She wears no wreath, no veil, only silence and remembrance. And so the seasons pass. The laughter of children continues on the rampart, The lilacs still flower. The bells still ring in springtime. But she, the maiden of the rampart, grows older, quieter. The mirror tells her truth without mercy. Silver hair where gold once gleamed, lines where once were smiles. Her world has narrowed to a small window behind the balsams in the Wharton almshouse. There she sits, day after day, watching the green hill and the playing children. They are as she once was, bright, unburdened, full of dreams. And she, watching them, lives her life again in memory. The white frock, the red shawl, the budding tree, the vow of love that ended in a grave. This is the play of her heart, the silent drama of a life remembered. No audience applauds it, no curtain falls, yet as the sunlight trembles on the rampart and the laughter of children rises into the air, something eternal lingers there, the cycle of innocence and loss, of joy renewed in others, though ended in oneself. Behind the window, the old maid smiles faintly through her tears. For outside, the children are dancing upon the green, sunlit rampart, their bare feet light as birds' wings upon the earth that keeps so many secrets. A picture from the ramparts. It is autumn, and the world stands between the fading warmth of summer and the slow breath of winter. We stand upon the old stone ramparts, high above the murmuring shore, and look out over the vast expanse of the sea. The evening sky glows with a deep amber light, and countless ships drift upon the calm waters, their sails turned to gold by the sun's last rays. Far on the horizon rises the Swedish coast, blue and distant, its rugged cliffs touched by the same gentle fire that burns across the heavens. The sea, so still, mirrors the sky like a sheet of molten glass, trembling only where a breeze moves across it. Behind us, the forest lies in solemn majesty. The trunks of mighty trees rise dark and proud, their crowns already thinned by the season's breath. Golden leaves flutter down like small forgotten prayers, spinning silently before they rest upon the ground. The air is cool and fragrant with decay and salt. And in that mingled scent of sea and forest, there lingers a melancholy that belongs only to autumn, the beauty of things that fade. Below, at the foot of the wall, stands a grim and lonely building, a fortress within the fortress, enclosed by palisades and shadows. Its narrow yard is paved with stones darkened by age and rain. Between the rampart and that prison lies a passage so narrow and dim that even the daylight hesitates to enter. Yet darker still are the small iron-barred openings in the wall, where no true window exists, only loopholes through which air and faint light creep into the cells beyond. Within those stone chambers dwell the condemned, men whose deeds have torn them from mercy and sunlight alike. And yet, even here, the world refuses to be entirely cruel. A single beam of the setting sun steals through one of those narrow slits and falls upon the bare floor of a cell. The light trembles upon the wall, touching the rough chains and the coarse fabric of a prisoner's coat. For God's Son, merciful and eternal, shines upon both the good and the wicked. The man in the cell lifts his head. His face is hard, carved with years of bitterness and crime. He glares at the ray of light as though it mocked him. But then something small flutters through the dying glow. A bird, light as breath, bright-eyed and free. It settles upon the grating and looks in unafraid. To the just and the unjust alike, the birds still sing. Tweet, tweet, it cries, a simple sound that carries the sweetness of all living things. It pecks gently at its own feathers, puffs out its small breast, and shakes itself with a careless joy. The prisoner stares. Slowly, something unfamiliar moves within him. A faint stirring of softness, of wonder, perhaps even of sorrow. He cannot name the thought that rises in his chest, but it is bound somehow to the sunbeam, to the bird, and to another memory that drifts up from long ago. The scent of violets growing wild at the foot of the wall in springtime. He remembers, though dimly, that once he too had known the world beyond these stones. Open fields, sunlight on his hands, laughter somewhere behind him. For an instant, his eyes grow less hard. Then, from beyond the forest, a sound echoes. The clear, jubilant call of the hunter's horn. Its notes ring bright and full, rolling across the water and over the walls like a celebration of freedom itself. The bird starts. It flutters away in a flash of wings. The last beam of sunlight fades, leaving the cell cold once more. Darkness settles again, in the room and in the man's heart. Yet something remains, a trace of warmth, a quiet afterglow that does not die as quickly as the light. Outside, the sea lies calm and shining, a mirror to the heavens. The waves rise and fall like the slow breathing of the earth. The sound of the horn drifts farther away, mingling with the rustle of the leaves and the whisper of the tide. Above, the stars begin to appear, faint, patient, eternal. Sound on, then, ye glorious strains of the hunter's horn. Let your music wander where man cannot go, through the woods, across the waters, and into the hearts of those forgotten by the world. For though the night comes swiftly, and the sea grows still as glass, somewhere in one dark cell, the memory of sunlight lingers, and with it, perhaps, the beginning of a prayer. The Old Street Lamp. Did you ever hear the story of the old street lamp? It is not remarkably interesting, but for once in a way, you may as well listen to it. It was a most respectable old lamp, which had seen many, many years of service, and now was to retire with a pension. It was this evening at its post for the last time, giving light to the street. His feelings were something like those of an old dancer at the theater, who is dancing for the last time, and knows that on the morrow she will be in her garret, alone and forgotten. The lamp had very great anxiety about the next day, for he knew that he had to appear for the first time at the town hall, to be inspected by the mayor and the council, who were to decide if he were fit for further service or not. Whether the lamp was good enough to be used to light the inhabitants of one of the suburbs, or in the country at some factory, and if not, it would be sent at once to an iron foundry to be melted down. In this latter case, it might be turned into anything, and he wondered very much whether he would then be able to remember that he had once been a street lamp, and it troubled him exceedingly. Whatever might happen, one thing seemed certain, that he would be separated from the watchman and his wife, whose family he looked upon as his own. The lamp had first been hung up on that very evening that the watchman, then a robust young man, had entered upon the duties of his office. Ah, well, it was a very long time since one became a lamp and the other a watchman. His wife had a little pride in those days. She seldom condescended to glance at the lamp, excepting when she passed by in the evening, never in the daytime. But in later years, when all these, the watchman, the wife, and the lamp, had grown old, she had attended to it, cleaned it, and supplied it with oil. The old people were thoroughly honest. They had never cheated the lamp of a single drop of the oil provided for it. This was the lamp's last night in the street. And tomorrow he must go to the town hall. Two very dark things to think of. No wonder he did not burn brightly. Many other thoughts also passed through his mind. How many persons he had lighted on their way, and how much he had seen. As much, very likely, as the mayor and corporation themselves. None of these thoughts were uttered aloud, however, for he was a good, honorable old lamp, who would not willingly do harm to anyone, especially to those in authority. As many things were recalled to his mind, the light would flash up with sudden brightness. He had, at such moments, a conviction that he would be remembered. There was a handsome young man once, thought he. It is certainly a long while ago, but I remember he had a little note written on pink paper with a gold edge. The writing was elegant, evidently a lady's hand. Twice he read it through and kissed it, and then looked up at me with eyes that said quite plainly, "I am the happiest of men." Only he and I know what was written on this, his first letter from his lady love. Ah, yes. And there was another pair of eyes that I remember. It is really wonderful how the thoughts jump from one thing to another. A funeral passed through the street. A young and beautiful woman lay on a bier, decked with garlands of flowers and attended by torches, which quite overpowered my light. All along the street stood the people from the houses, in crowds, ready to join the procession. But when the torches had passed from before me, and I could look round, I saw one person alone, standing, leaning against my post, and weeping. Never shall I forget the sorrowful eyes that looked up at me. These and similar reflections occupied the old street lamp. On this, the last time that his light would shine. The sentry, when he is relieved from his post, knows at least who will succeed him, and may whisper a few words to him. But the lamp did not know his successor, or he could have given him a few hints respecting rain or mist, and could have informed him how far the moon's rays would rest on the pavement, and from which side the wind generally blew, and so on. On the bridge over the canal stood 3 persons who wished to recommend themselves to the lamp, for they thought he could give the office to whomsoever he chose. The first was a herring's head, which could emit light in the darkness. He remarked that it would be a great saving of oil if they placed him on the lamp post. Number 2 was a piece of rotten wood, which also shines in the dark. He considered himself descended from an old stem, once the pride of the forest. The third was a glowworm, and how he found his way there, the lamp could not imagine. Yet there he was, and could really give light, as well as the others. But the rotten wood and the herring's head declared most solemnly, by all they held sacred, that the glowworm only gave light at certain times, and must not be allowed to compete with themselves. The old lamp assured them that not one of them could give sufficient light to fill the position of a street lamp. But they would believe nothing he said. And when they discovered that he had not the power of naming his successor, they said they were very glad to hear it, for the lamp was too old and worn out to make a proper choice. At this moment, the wind came rushing round the corner of the street and through the air holes of the old lamp. "What is this I hear?" said he. "That you are going away tomorrow? Is this evening the last time we shall meet? Then I must present you with a farewell gift. I will blow into your brain, so that in future you shall not only be able to remember all that you have seen or heard in the past, but your light within shall be so bright that you shall be able to understand all that is said or done in your presence." "Oh, that is really a very, very great gift," said the old lamp. "I thank you most heartily. I only hope I shall not be melted down." "That is not likely to happen yet," said the wind. "And I will also blow a memory into you, so that should you receive other similar presents, your old age will pass very pleasantly. That is if I am not melted down," said the lamp. "But should I, in that case, still retain my memory?" "Do be reasonable, old lamp," said the wind, puffing away. At this moment, the moon burst forth from the clouds. "What will you give the old lamp?" asked the wind. "I can give nothing," she replied. "I am on the wane, and no lamps have ever given me light, while I have frequently shone upon them." And with these words, the moon hid herself again behind the clouds, that she might be saved from further importunities. Just then, a drop fell upon the lamp from the roof of the house, but the drop explained that he was a gift from those gray clouds, and perhaps the best of all gifts. "I shall penetrate you so thoroughly," he said, "that you will have the power of becoming rusty, and, if you wish it, to crumble into dust in one night." But this seemed to the lamp a very shabby present, and the wind thought so too. "Does no one give any more? Will no one give any more?" shouted the breath of the wind, as loud as it could. Then a bright falling star came down, leaving a broad, luminous streak behind it. "What was that?" cried the herring's head. "Did not a star fall? I really believe it went into the lamp. Certainly, when such high-born personages try for the office, we may as well say, 'Good night,' and go home." And so they did, all three, while the old lamp threw a wonderfully strong light all around him. "This is a glorious gift," said he. "The bright stars have always been a joy to me, and have always shone more brilliantly than I ever could shine, though I have tried with my whole might. And now they have noticed me, a poor old lamp, and have sent me a gift that will enable me to see clearly everything that I remember, as if it still stood before me, and to be seen by all those who love me. And herein lies the truest pleasure, for joy which we cannot share with others is only half enjoyed. "That sentiment does you honor," said the wind. "But for this purpose, wax lights will be necessary. If these are not lighted in you, your particular faculties will not benefit others in the least. The stars have not thought of this. They suppose that you and every other light must be a wax taper. But I must go down now." So he laid himself to rest. "Wax tapers, indeed," said the lamp. "I have never yet had these, nor is it likely I ever shall. If I could only be sure of not being melted down." The next day, well, perhaps we had better pass over the next day. The evening had come, and the lamp was resting in a grandfather's chair. And guess where? Why, at the old watchman's house. He had begged, as a favor, that the mayor and corporation would allow him to keep the street lamp, in consideration of his long and faithful service, as he had himself hung it up and lit it on the day he first commenced his duties 24 years ago. He looked upon it almost as his own child. He had no children, so the lamp was given to him. There it lay, in the great armchair near to the warm stove. It seemed almost as if it had grown larger, for it appeared quite to fill the chair. The old people sat at their supper, casting friendly glances at the old lamp, whom they would willingly have admitted to a place at the table. It is quite true that they dwelt in a cellar, 2 yards deep in the earth, and they had to cross a stone passage to get to their room. But within it was warm and comfortable, and strips of list had been nailed round the door. The bed and the little window had curtains, and everything looked clean and neat. On the window seat stood 2 curious flower pots, which a sailor named Christian had brought over from the East or West Indies. They were of clay, and in the form of 2 elephants, with open backs. They were hollow and filled with earth, and through the open space, flowers bloomed. In one grew some very fine chives, or leeks. This was the kitchen garden. The other elephant, which contained a beautiful geranium, they called their flower garden. On the wall hung a large colored print representing the Congress of Vienna and all the kings and emperors at once. A clock with heavy weights hung on the wall and went tick, tick, steadily enough. Yet it was always rather too fast, which, however, the old people said was better than being too slow. They were now eating their supper, while the old street lamp, as we have heard, lay in the grandfather's armchair near the stove. It seemed to the lamp as if the whole world had turned round. But after a while, the old watchman looked at the lamp and spoke of what they had both gone through together, in rain and in fog, during the short, bright nights of summer, or in the long winter nights through the drifting snowstorms, when he longed to be at home in the cellar. Then the lamp felt it was all right again. He saw everything that had happened quite clearly, as if it were passing before him. Surely the wind had given him an excellent gift. The old people were very active and industrious. They were never idle for even a single hour. On Sunday afternoons, they would bring out some books, generally a book of travels, which they were very fond of. The old man would read aloud about Africa, with its great forests and the wild elephants, while his wife would listen attentively, stealing a glance now and then at the clay elephants, which served as flower pots. "I can almost imagine I am seeing it all," she said. And then how the lamp wished for a wax taper to be lighted in him, for then the old woman would have seen the smallest detail as clearly as he did himself. The lofty trees with their thickly entwined branches, the naked Negroes on horseback, and whole herds of elephants treading down bamboo thickets with their broad, heavy feet. "What is the use of all my capabilities," sighed the old lamp, "when I cannot obtain any wax lights? They have only oil and tallow here, and these will not do." One day, a great heap of wax candle ends found their way into the cellar. The larger pieces were burnt, and the smaller ones the old woman kept for waxing her thread. So there were now candles enough, but it never occurred to anyone to put a little piece in the lamp. "Here I am now, with my rare powers," thought the lamp. "I have faculties within me, but I cannot share them. They do not know that I could cover these white walls with beautiful tapestry, or change them into noble forests, or indeed to anything else they might wish for." The lamp, however, was always kept clean and shining in a corner where it attracted all eyes. Strangers looked upon it as lumber, but the old people did not care for that. They loved the lamp. One day, it was the watchman's birthday. The old woman approached the lamp, smiling to herself, and said, "I will have an illumination today in honor of my old man." And the lamp rattled in his metal frame, for he thought, "Now at last I shall have a light within me." But after all, no wax light was placed in the lamp, but oil as usual. The lamp burned through the whole evening, and began to perceive too clearly that the gift of the stars would remain a hidden treasure all his life. Then he had a dream. For to one with his faculties, dreaming was no difficulty. It appeared to him that the old people were dead, and that he had been taken to the iron foundry to be melted down. It caused him quite as much anxiety as on the day when he had been called upon to appear before the mayor and the council at the town hall. But though he had been endowed with the power of falling into decay from rust when he pleased, he did not make use of it. He was therefore put into the melting furnace and changed into as elegant an iron candlestick as you could wish to see, one intended to hold a wax taper. The candlestick was in the form of an angel holding a nosegay, in the center of which the wax taper was to be placed. It was to stand on a green writing table in a very pleasant room. Many books were scattered about, and splendid paintings hung on the walls. The owner of the room was a poet and a man of intellect. Everything he thought or wrote was pictured around him. Nature showed herself to him sometimes in the dark forests, at others in cheerful meadows where the storks were strutting about, or on the deck of a ship sailing across the foaming sea with the clear blue sky above, or at night the glittering stars. "What powers I possess," said the lamp, awaking from his dream. "I could almost wish to be melted down. But no, that must not be while the old people live. They love me for myself alone. They keep me bright and supply me with oil. I am as well off as the picture of the Congress, in which they take so much pleasure." And from that time he felt at rest in himself, and not more so than such an honorable old lamp really deserved to be. The Neighbouring Families. One would have thought that something important was going on in the duck pond, but it was nothing after all. All the ducks lying quietly on the water, or standing on their heads in it, for they could do that. At once swarm to the sides. The traces of their feet were seen in the wet earth, and their cackling was heard far and wide. The water, which a few moments before had been as clear and smooth as a mirror, became very troubled. Before, every tree, every neighboring bush, the old farmhouse with the holes in the roof and the swallow's nest, and especially the great rose bush full of flowers, had been reflected in it. The rose bush covered the wall and hung out over the water, in which everything was seen as if in a picture, except that it all stood on its head. But when the water was troubled, everything got mixed up, and the picture was gone. 2 feathers, which the fluttering ducks had lost, floated up and down. Suddenly, they took a rush, as if the wind were coming. But as it did not come, they had to lie still, and the water once more became quiet and smooth. The roses were again reflected. They were very beautiful, but they did not know it, for no one had told them. The sun shone among the delicate leaves. Everything breathed forth the loveliest fragrance, and all felt as we do when we are filled with joy at the thought of our happiness. "How beautiful existence is," said each rose. "The only thing that I wish for is to be able to kiss the sun, because it is so warm and bright. I should also like to kiss those roses down in the water, which are so much like us, and the pretty little birds down in the nest. There are some up above, too. They put out their heads and pipe softly. They have no feathers, like their father and mother. We have good neighbors, both below and above. How beautiful existence is." The young ones above and below, those below, were really only shadows in the water, were sparrows. Their parents were sparrows too, and had taken possession of the empty swallow's nest of last year, and now lived in it as if it were their own property. "Are those the ducks' children swimming here?" asked the young sparrows when they saw the feathers on the water. "If you must ask questions, ask sensible ones," said their mother. "Don't you see that they are feathers, such as I wear, and you will wear too? But ours are finer. Still, I should like to have them up in the nest, for they keep one warm. I am very curious to know what the ducks were so startled about. Not about us, certainly, although I did say peep to you pretty loudly. The thick-headed roses ought to know why, but they know nothing at all. They only look at themselves and smell. I am heartily tired of such neighbors. Listen to the dear little birds up there," said the roses. "They begin to want to sing too, but are not able to manage it yet. But it will soon come. What a pleasure that must be. It is fine to have such cheerful neighbors." Suddenly, 2 horses came galloping up to be watered. A peasant boy rode on one, and he had taken off all his clothes except his large, broad black hat. The boy whistled like a bird and rode into the pond where it was deepest. And as he passed the rose bush, he plucked a rose and stuck it in his hat. Now he looked dressed and rode on. The other roses looked after their sister and asked each other, "Where can she be going to?" But none of them knew. "I should like to go out into the world for once," said one. "But here at home, among our green leaves, it is beautiful too. The whole day long, the sun shines bright and warm, and in the night, the sky shines more beautifully still. We can see that through all the little holes in it. They meant the stars, but they knew no better. We make it lively about the house," said the sparrow mother, "and people say that a swallow's nest brings luck, so they are glad of us. But such neighbors as ours. A rose bush on the wall like that causes damp. I dare say it will be taken away. Then we shall, perhaps, have some corn growing here. The roses are good for nothing but to be looked at and to be smelt, or at most to be stuck in a hat. Every year, as I have been told by my mother, they fall off. The farmer's wife preserves them and strews salt among them. Then they get a French name, which I neither can pronounce nor care to, and are put into the fire to make a nice smell. You see, that's their life. They exist only for the eye and the nose. Now you know. In the evening, when the gnats were playing about in the warm air and in the red clouds, the nightingale came and sang to the roses that the beautiful was like sunshine to the world, and that the beautiful lived forever. The roses thought that the nightingale was singing about itself, and that one might easily have believed. They had no idea that the song was about them, but they were very pleased with it, and wondered whether all the little sparrows could become nightingales. I understand the song of that bird very well, said the young sparrows. There was only one word that was not clear to me. What does the beautiful mean? Nothing at all, answered their mother. That's only something external. Up at the hall, where the pigeons have their own house, and corn and peas are strewn before them every day, I have dined with them myself, and that you shall do in time too. For tell me what company you keep, and I'll tell you who you are. Up at the hall, they have 2 birds with green necks and a crest upon their heads. They can spread out their tails like a great wheel, and these are so bright with various colors that it makes one's eyes ache. These birds are called peacocks, and that is the beautiful. If they were only plucked a little, they would look no better than the rest of us. I would have plucked them already if they had not been so big. I'll pluck them, piped the young sparrow, who had no feathers yet. In the farmhouse lived a young married couple. They loved each other dearly, were industrious and active, and everything in their home looked very nice. On Sundays, the young wife came down early, plucked a handful of the most beautiful roses, and put them into a glass of water, which she placed upon the cupboard. Now I see that it is Sunday, said the husband, kissing his little wife. They sat down, read their hymn book, and held each other by the hand, while the sun shone down upon the fresh roses and upon them. This sight is really too tedious, said the sparrow mother, who could see into the room from her nest, and she flew away. The same thing happened on the following Sunday. For every Sunday, fresh roses were put into the glass, but the rose bush bloomed as beautifully as ever. The young sparrows now had feathers and wanted very much to fly with their mother, but she would not allow it, and so they had to stay at home. In one of her flights, however it may have happened, she was caught, before she was aware of it, in a horsehair net which some boys had attached to a tree. The horsehair was drawn tightly round her leg, as tightly as if the latter were to be cut off. She was in great pain and terror. The boys came running up, and seized her, and in no gentle way either. "It's only a sparrow," they said. They did not, however, let her go, but took her home with them. And every time she cried, they hit her on the beak. In the farmhouse was an old man who understood making soap into cakes and balls, both for shaving and washing. He was a merry old man, always wandering about. On seeing the sparrow which the boys had brought, and which they said they did not want, he asked, "Shall we make it look very pretty?" At these words, an icy shudder ran through the sparrow mother. Out of his box, in which were the most beautiful colors, the old man took a quantity of shining leaf gold, while the boys had to go and fetch some white of egg, with which the sparrow was to be smeared all over. The gold was stuck onto this, and the sparrow mother was now gilded all over. But she, trembling in every limb, did not think of the adornment. Then the soap man tore off a small piece from the red lining of his old jacket, and cutting it so as to make it look like a cock's comb, he stuck it to the bird's head. "Now you will see the gold jacket fly," said the old man, letting the sparrow go, which flew away in deadly fear, with the sun shining upon her. How she glittered! All the sparrows, and even a crow, and an old boy he was too, were startled at the sight. But still they flew after her to learn what kind of strange bird she was. Driven by fear and horror, she flew homeward. She was almost sinking, fainting to the earth, while the flock of pursuing birds increased, some even attempting to peck at her. "Look at her! Look at her!" they all cried. "Look at her! Look at her!" cried her little ones as she approached the nest. "That is certainly a young peacock, for it glitters in all colors. It makes one's eyes ache, as Mother told us. Peep, that's the beautiful." And then they pecked at the bird with their little beaks, so that it was impossible for her to get into the nest. She was so exhausted that she couldn't even say, "Peep," much less, "I am your own mother." The other birds, too, now fell upon the sparrow and plucked off feather after feather until she fell bleeding into the rose bush. "Poor creature," said all the roses. "Only be still, and we will hide you. Lean your little head against us." The sparrow spread out her wings once more, then drew them closely to her, and lay dead near the neighboring family, the beautiful fresh roses. "Peep," sounded from the nest. "Where can Mother be so long? It's more than I can understand. It cannot be a trick of hers, and mean that we are now to take care of ourselves. She has left us the house as an inheritance. But to which of us is it to belong when we have families of our own? Yes, it won't do for you to stay with me when I increase my household with a wife and children," said the smallest. I dare say I shall have more wives and children than you," said the second. "But I am the eldest," exclaimed the third. Then they all got excited. They hit out with their wings, pecked with their beaks, and flop, one after another, was thrown out of the nest. There they lay with their anger, holding their heads on one side and blinking the eye that was turned upwards. That was their way of looking foolish. They could fly a little. By practice, they learned to improve, and at last they agreed upon a sign by which to recognize each other if they should meet in the world later on. It was to be one peep and 3 scratches on the ground with the left foot. The young one who had remained behind in the nest made himself as broad as he could, for he was the proprietor. But this greatness did not last long. In the night, the red flames burst through the window and seized the roof. The dry straw blazed up high, and the whole house, together with the young sparrow, was burned. The 2 others, who wanted to marry, thus saved their lives by a stroke of luck when the sun rose again, and everything looked as refreshed as if it had had a quiet sleep. There only remained of the farmhouse a few black charred beams leaning against the chimney, which was now its own master. Thick smoke still rose from the ruins, but the rose bush stood yonder, fresh, blooming, and untouched, every flower and every twig being reflected in the clear water. How beautifully the roses bloom before the ruined house, exclaimed a passer-by. A pleasanter picture cannot be imagined. I must have that. And the man took out of his portfolio a little book with white leaves. He was a painter, and with his pencil he drew the smoking house, the charred beams, and the overhanging chimney, which bent more and more. In the foreground, he put the large, blooming rose bush, which presented a charming view. For its sake alone, the whole picture had been drawn. Later in the day, the 2 sparrows who had been born there came by. "Where is the house?" they asked. "Where is the nest?" "Peep, all is burned, and our strong brother too. That's what he has now for keeping the nest." The roses got off very well. There they still stand with their red cheeks. They certainly do not mourn at their neighbors' misfortunes. I don't want to talk to them, and it looks miserable here. That's my opinion. And away they went. On a beautiful, sunny autumn day, one could almost have believed it was still the middle of summer. There hopped about, in the dry, clean-swept courtyard, before the principal entrance of the hall, a number of black, white, and gaily colored pigeons, all shining in the sunlight. The pigeon mothers said to their young ones, "Stand in groups, stand in groups." for that looks much better. What kind of creatures are those little gray ones that run about behind us?" asked an old pigeon with red and green in her eyes. "Little gray ones, little gray ones," she cried. "They are sparrows and good creatures. We have always had the reputation of being pious, so we will allow them to pick up the corn with us. They don't interrupt our talk, and they scrape so prettily when they bow." Indeed, they were continually making 3-foot scrapings with the left foot, and also said, "Peep." By this means, they recognized each other, for they were the sparrows from the nest on the burned house. "Here is excellent fare," said the sparrow. The pigeons strutted round one another, puffed out their chests mightily, and had their own private views and opinions. "Do you see that pouter pigeon?" said one to the other. "Do you see how she swallows the peas? She eats too many, and the best ones too. Coo-roo, coo-roo, how she lifts her crest, the ugly, spiteful creature. Coo-roo, coo-roo," and the eyes of all sparkled with malice. "Stand in groups, stand in groups, little gray ones, little gray ones. Coo-roo, coo-roo, coo-roo." So their chatter ran on, and so it will run on for thousands of years. The sparrows ate lustily. They listened attentively, and even stood in the ranks with the others. But it did not suit them at all. They were full, and so they left the pigeons, exchanging opinions about them, slipped in under the garden palings, and when they found the door leading into the house open, one of them, who was more than full, and therefore felt brave, hopped on to the threshold. "Peep," said he, "I may venture that." "Peep," said the other, "so may I, and something more too." And he hopped into the room. No one was there. The third sparrow, seeing this, flew still farther into the room, exclaiming, "All or nothing. It is a curious man's nest, all the same. And what have they put up here? What is it?" Close to the sparrows, the roses were blooming. They were reflected in the water, and the charred beams leaned against the overhanging chimney. "Do tell me what this is. How comes this in a room at the hall?" And all 3 sparrows wanted to fly over the roses and the chimney, but flew against a flat wall. It was all a picture, a great, splendid picture, which the artist had painted from a sketch. "Peep," said the sparrows. "It's nothing. It only looks like something. Peep. That is the beautiful. Do you understand it? I don't." And they flew away. For some people came into the room. Days and years went by. The pigeons had often cooed, not to say growled, the spiteful creatures. The sparrows had been frozen in winter, and had lived merrily in summer. They were all betrothed, or married, or whatever you like to call it. They had little ones, and of course each one thought his own the handsomest and cleverest. One flew this way, another that, and when they met, they recognized each other by their peep and the 3 scrapes with the left foot. The eldest had remained an old maid and had no nest nor young ones. It was her pet idea to see a great city, so she flew to Copenhagen. There was a large house painted in many gay colors, standing close to the castle and the canal, upon which latter were to be seen many ships laden with apples and pottery. The windows of the house were broader at the bottom than at the top, and when the sparrows looked through them, every room appeared to them like a tulip, with the brightest colors and shades. But in the middle of the tulip stood white men, made of marble. A few were of plaster, still looked at with sparrow's eyes. That comes to the same thing. Up on the roof stood a metal chariot drawn by metal horses, and the goddess of victory, also of metal, was driving. It was Thorwaldsen's museum. "How it shines, how it shines," said the maiden sparrow. "I suppose that is the beautiful peep. But here it is larger than a peacock." She still remembered what in her childhood's days her mother had looked upon as the greatest among the beautiful. She flew down into the courtyard. There, everything was extremely fine. Palms and branches were painted on the walls, and in the middle of the court stood a great blooming rose tree, spreading out its fresh boughs, covered with roses, over a grave. Thither flew the maiden sparrow, for she saw several of her own kind there, a peep and 3 foot scrapings. In this way, she had often greeted throughout the year, and no one here had responded, for those who are once parted do not meet every day. And so this greeting had become a habit with her. But today, 2 old sparrows and a young one answered with a peep, and the thrice repeated scrape with the left foot. "Ah, good day, good day." They were 2 old ones from the nest, and a little one of the family. "Do we meet here? It's a grand place, but there's not much to eat. This is the beautiful peep." Many people came out of the side rooms where the beautiful marble statues stood, and approached the grave where lay the great master who had created these works of art. All stood with enraptured faces round Thorwaldsen's grave, and a few picked up the fallen rose leaves and preserved them. They had come from afar, one from mighty England, others from Germany and France. The fairest of the ladies plucked one of the roses and hid it in her bosom. Then the sparrows thought that the roses rained were here, and that the house had been built for their sake. That appeared to them to be really too much. But since all the people showed their love for the roses, they did not wish to be behindhand. "Peep," they said, sweeping the ground with their tails, and blinking with one eye at the roses. They had not looked at them long before they were convinced that they were their old neighbors. And so they really were. The painter, who had drawn the rose bush near the ruined house, had afterwards obtained permission to dig it up, and had given it to the architect, for finer roses had never been seen. The architect had planted it upon Thorwaldsen's grave, where it bloomed as an emblem of the beautiful, and yielded fragrant red rose leaves to be carried as mementos to distant lands. "Have you obtained an appointment here in the city?" asked the sparrows. The roses nodded. They recognized their gray neighbors and were pleased to see them again. "How glorious it is to live and to bloom, to see old friends again, and happy faces every day. It is as if every day were a festival." "Peep," said the sparrows. "Yes, they are really our old neighbors. We remember their origin near the pond. Peep, how they have got on. Yes, some succeed while they are asleep. Ah, there's a faded leaf. I can see that quite plainly." And they pecked at it till it fell off, but the tree stood there, fresher and greener than ever. The roses bloomed in the sunshine on Thorwaldsen's grave and became associated with his immortal name. Little Tuk. Yes, they called him Little Tuk, but it was not his real name. He had called himself so before he could speak plainly, and he meant it for Charles. It was all very well for those who knew him, but not for strangers. Little Tuk was left at home to take care of his little sister, Gustava, who was much younger than himself, and he had to learn his lessons at the same time, and the two things could not very well be performed together. The poor boy sat there with his sister on his lap and sung to her all the songs he knew. And now and then he looked into his geography lesson that lay open before him. By the next morning, he had to learn by heart all the towns in Zealand and all that could be described of them. His mother came home at last and took little Gustava in her arms. Then Tuk ran to the window and read so eagerly that he nearly read his eyes out, for it had become darker and darker every minute, and his mother had no money to buy a light. "There goes the old washerwoman up the lane," said the mother as she looked out of the window. "The poor woman can hardly drag herself along, and now she had to drag a pail of water from the well. Be a good boy, Tuk, and run across and help the old woman, won't you?" So Tuk ran across quickly and helped her. But when he came back into the room, it was quite dark, and there was not a word said about a light. So he was obliged to go to bed on his little truckle bedstead. And there he lay and thought of his geography lesson, and of Zealand, and of all the master had told him. He ought really to have read it over again, but he could not for want of light. So he put the geography book under his pillow, for he had heard that this was a great help towards learning a lesson, but not always to be depended upon. He still lay thinking and thinking, when all at once it seemed as if someone kissed him on his eyes and mouth. He slept, and yet he did not sleep. And it appeared as if the old washerwoman looked at him with kind eyes and said, "It would be a great pity if you did not know your lesson tomorrow morning. You helped me, and now I will help you, and Providence will always keep those who help themselves." And at the same time, the book under Tuk's pillow began to move about. "Cluck, cluck, cluck," cried a hen as she crept towards him. "I am a hen from Kyoga." And then she told him how many inhabitants the town contained, and about a battle that had been fought there, which really was not worth speaking of. Crack, crack. Down fell something. It was a wooden bird, the parrot, which is used as a target, as Prasto. He said there were as many inhabitants in that town as he had nails in his body. He was very proud, and said, "Thorwaldsen lived close to me, and here I am now, quite comfortable." But now, little Tuk was no longer in bed. All in a moment, he found himself on horseback. Gallop, gallop, away he went, seated in front of a richly attired knight with a waving plume, who held him on the saddle. And so they rode through the wood by the old town of Wordingberg, which was very large and busy. The king's castle was surrounded by lofty towers, and radiant light streamed from all the windows. Within there were songs and dancing. King Waldemar and the young, gaily dressed ladies of the court were dancing together. Morning dawned, and as the sun rose, the whole city and the king's castle sank suddenly down together. One tower after another fell, till at last only one remained standing on the hill where the castle had formerly been. The town now appeared small and poor, and the schoolboys read in their books, which they carried under their arms, that it contained 2,000 inhabitants. But this was a mere boast, for it did not contain so many. And again, little Tuk lay in his bed, scarcely knowing whether he was dreaming or not, for someone stood by him. "Tuk, little Tuk," said a voice. It was a very little person who spoke. He was dressed as a sailor, and looked small enough to be a middy, but he was not one. "I bring you many greetings from Corsor. It is a rising town, full of life. It has steamships and mail coaches. In times past, they used to call it ugly, but that is no longer true. I lie on the seashore, said Corsor. I have high roads and pleasure gardens. I have given birth to a poet who was witty and entertaining, which they are not all. I once wanted to fit out a ship to sail round the world, but I did not accomplish it, though most likely I might have done so. But I am fragrant with perfume, for close to my gates most lovely roses bloom. Then before the eyes of little Tuk appeared a confusion of colors, red and green. But it cleared off, and he could distinguish a cliff close to the bay, the slopes of which were quite overgrown with verdure, and on its summit stood a fine old church with pointed towers. Springs of water flowed out of the cliff in thick waterspouts, so that there was a continual splashing. Close by sat an old king with a golden crown on his white head. This was King Hror of the Springs, and near the springs stood the town of Roskilde, as it is called. Then all the kings and queens of Denmark went up the ascent to the old church, hand in hand, with golden crowns on their heads, while the organ played, and the fountains sent forth jets of water. Little Tuk saw and heard it all. Don't forget the names of these towns, said King Hror. All at once, everything vanished. But where? It seemed to him like turning over the leaves of a book. And now there stood before him an old peasant woman who had come from Sorrow, where the grass grows in the marketplace. She had a green linen apron thrown over her head and shoulders, and it was quite wet, as if it had been raining heavily. Yes, that it has, said she. And then, just as she was going to tell him a great many pretty stories from Holberg's comedies, and about Valdemar and Absalom, she suddenly shrunk up together and wagged her head as if she were a frog about to spring. Croak, she cried. It is always wet, and as quiet as death in sorrow. Then little Tuk saw she was changed into a frog. Croak. And again she was an old woman. One must dress according to the weather, said she. It is wet, and my town is just like a bottle. By the cork we must go in, and by the cork we must come out again. In olden times I had beautiful fish, and now I have fresh, rosy-cheeked boys in the bottom of the bottle, and they learn wisdom, Hebrew and Greek. Croak. How it sounded like the cry of the frogs on the moor, or like the creaking of great boots when someone is marching. Always the same tone, so monotonous and wearing that little Tuk at length fell fast asleep. And then the sound could not annoy him, but even in this sleep came a dream, or something like it. His little sister Gustava, with her blue eyes and fair curly hair, had grown up a beautiful maiden all at once, and without having wings, she could fly. And they flew together over Zealand, over green forests and blue lakes. Hark, so you hear the cock crow, little Tuk. Cock-a-doodle-doo. The fowls are flying out of Kyoga. You shall have a large farmyard. You shall never suffer hunger or want. The bird of good omen shall be yours, and you shall become a rich and happy man. Your house shall rise up like King Waldemar's towers, and shall be richly adorned with marble statues like those at Prasto. Understand me well. Your name shall travel with fame round the world, like the ship that was to sail from Corsor and at Roeskilde. Don't forget the names of the towns. As King Hror said, you shall speak well and clearly, little Tuk. And when at last you lie in your grave, you shall sleep peacefully, as if I lay in sorrow, said little Tuk, awaking. It was bright daylight, and he could not remember his dream, but that was not necessary, for we are not to know what will happen to us in the future. Then he sprang out of bed quickly and read over his lesson in the book, and knew it all at once, quite correctly. The old washerwoman put her head in at the door and nodded to him quite kindly and said, "Many thanks, you good child, for your help yesterday. I hope all your beautiful dreams will come true." Little Tuk did not at all know what he had dreamt, but one above did. The shadow. In very hot climates, where the heat of the sun has great power, people are usually as brown as mahogany, and in the hottest countries, they are Negroes, with black skins. A learned man once traveled into one of these warm climates from the cold regions of the north, and thought he would roam about as he did at home. But he soon had to change his opinion. He found that, like all sensible people, he must remain in the house during the whole day, with every window and door closed, so that it looked as if all in the house were asleep or absent. The houses of the narrow street in which he lived were so lofty that the sun shone upon them from morning till evening, and it became quite unbearable. This learned man from the cold regions was young as well as clever, but it seemed to him as if he were sitting in an oven, and he became quite exhausted and weak, and grew so thin that his shadow shriveled up and became much smaller than it had been at home. The sun took away even what was left of it, and he saw nothing of it till the evening, after sunset. It was really a pleasure, as soon as the lights were brought into the room, to see the shadow stretch itself against the wall, even to the ceiling, so tall was it, and it really wanted a good stretch to recover its strength. the learned man would sometimes go out into the balcony to stretch himself also. And as soon as the stars came forth in the clear, beautiful sky, he felt revived. People at this hour began to make their appearance in all the balconies in the street. For in warm climates, every window has a balcony in which they can breathe the fresh evening air, which is very necessary, even to those who are used to a heat that makes them as brown as mahogany, so that the street presented a very lively appearance. Here were shoemakers and tailors, and all sorts of people sitting in the street beneath. They brought out tables and chairs, lighted candles by hundreds, talked and sang, and were very merry. There were people walking, carriages driving, and mules trotting along with their bells on the harness. Tingle, tingle, as they went. Then the dead were carried to the grave with the sound of solemn music and the tolling of the church bells. It was indeed a scene of varied life in the street. One house only, which was just opposite to the one in which the foreign learned man lived, formed a contrast to all this. For it was quite still, and yet somebody dwelt there, for flowers stood in the balcony, blooming beautifully in the hot sun, and this could not have been unless they had been watered carefully. Therefore, someone must be in the house to do this. The doors leading to the balcony were half opened in the evening, and although in the front room all was dark, music could be heard from the interior of the house. The foreign learned man considered this music very delightful, but perhaps he fancied it, for everything in these warm countries pleased him, excepting the heat of the sun. The foreign landlord said he did not know who had taken the opposite house. Nobody was to be seen there. And as to the music, he thought it seemed very tedious, to him most uncommonly so. It is just as if someone was practicing a piece that he could not manage. It is always the same piece. He thinks, I suppose, that he will be able to manage it at last. But I do not think so, however long he may play it. Once the foreigner woke in the night. He slept with the door open, which led to the balcony. The wind had raised the curtain before it, and there appeared a wonderful brightness over all in the balcony of the opposite house. The flowers seemed like flames of the most gorgeous colors, and among the flowers stood a beautiful, slender maiden. It was to him as if light streamed from her and dazzled his eyes. But then he had only just opened them as he awoke from his sleep. With one spring, he was out of bed and crept softly behind the curtain. But she was gone. The brightness had disappeared. The flowers no longer appeared like flames, although still as beautiful as ever. The door stood ajar, and from an inner room sounded music so sweet and so lovely that it produced the most enchanting thoughts and acted on the senses with magic power. Who could live there? Where was the real entrance? For both in the street and in the lane at the side, the whole ground floor was a continuation of shops, and people could not always be passing through them. One evening, the foreigner sat in the balcony. A light was burning in his own room, just behind him. It was quite natural, therefore, that his shadow should fall on the wall of the opposite house, so that as he sat amongst the flowers on his balcony, when he moved, his shadow moved also. I think my shadow is the only living thing to be seen opposite, said the learned man. See how pleasantly it sits among the flowers. The door is only ajar. The shadow ought to be clever enough to step in and look about him, and then to come back and tell me what he has seen. You could make yourself useful in this way, said he, jokingly. Be so good as to step in now, will you? And then he nodded to the shadow, and the shadow nodded in return. Now go, but don't stay away altogether. Then the foreigner stood up, and the shadow on the opposite balcony stood up also. The foreigner turned round. The shadow turned. And if anyone had observed, they might have seen it go straight into the half-opened door of the opposite balcony as the learned man re-entered his own room and let the curtain fall. The next morning, he went out to take his coffee and read the newspapers. How is this? He exclaimed as he stood in the sunshine. I have lost my shadow. So it really did go away yesterday evening, and it has not returned. This is very annoying. And it certainly did vex him, not so much because the shadow was gone, but because he knew there was a story of a man without a shadow. All the people at home, in his country, knew this story. And when he returned and related his own adventures, they would say it was only an imitation, and he had no desire for such things to be said of him. So he decided not to speak of it at all, which was a very sensible determination. In the evening, he went out again on his balcony, taking care to place the light behind him. For he knew that a shadow always wants his master for a screen. But he could not entice him out. He made himself little, and he made himself tall. But there was no shadow. And no shadow came. He said, "Hem, ahem." But it was all useless. That was very vexatious. But in warm countries, everything grows very quickly. And after a week had passed, he saw, to his great joy, that a new shadow was growing from his feet when he walked in the sunshine, so that the root must have remained. After 3 weeks, he had quite a respectable shadow, which, during his return journey to northern lands, continued to grow, and became at last so large that he might very well have spared half of it. When this learned man arrived at home, He wrote books about the true, the good, and the beautiful, which are to be found in this world. And so days and years passed. Many, many years. One evening, as he sat in his study, a very gentle tap was heard at the door. "Come in," said he, but no one came. He opened the door, and there stood before him a man so remarkably thin that he felt seriously troubled at his appearance. He was, however, very well dressed, and looked like a gentleman. "To whom have I the honor of speaking?" said he. "Ah, I hoped you would recognize me," said the elegant stranger. "I have gained so much that I have a body of flesh and clothes to wear. You never expected to see me in such a condition. Do you not recognize your old shadow? Ah, you never expected that I should return to you again. All has been prosperous with me since I was with you last. I have become rich in every way, and were I inclined to purchase my freedom from service, I could easily do so." And as he spoke, he rattled between his fingers a number of costly trinkets which hung to a thick gold watch chain he wore round his neck. Diamond rings sparkled on his fingers, and it was all real. "I cannot recover from my astonishment," said the learned man. "What does all this mean?" "Something rather unusual," said the shadow. "But you are yourself an uncommon man, and you know very well that I have followed in your footsteps ever since your childhood. As soon as you found that I have traveled enough to be trusted alone, I went my own way, and I am now in the most brilliant circumstances. But I felt a kind of longing to see you once more before you die, and I wanted to see this place again, for there is always a clinging to the land of one's birth. I know that you have now another shadow. Do I owe you anything? If so, have the goodness to say what it is." "No." "Is it really you?" said the learned man. "Well, this is most remarkable. I never supposed it possible that a man's old shadow could become a human being." "Just tell me what I owe you," said the shadow, "for I do not like to be in debt to any man." "How can you talk in that manner?" said the learned man. "What question of debt can there be between us? You are as free as anyone. I rejoice exceedingly to hear of your good fortune. Sit down, old friend, and tell me a little of how it happened, and what you saw in the house opposite to me while we were in those hot climates." "Yes, I will tell you all about it," said the shadow, sitting down. "But then you must promise me never to tell in this city, wherever you may meet me, that I have been your shadow. I am thinking of being married, for I have more than sufficient to support a family. Make yourself quite easy, said the learned man. "I will tell no one who you really are. Here is my hand, I promise, and a word is sufficient between man and man. Between man and a shadow," said the shadow, for he could not help saying so. It was really most remarkable how very much he had become a man in appearance. He was dressed in a suit of the very finest black cloth, polished boots, and an opera crush hat, which could be folded together so that nothing could be seen but the crown and the rim, besides the trinkets, the gold chain, and the diamond rings already spoken of. The shadow was, in fact, very well dressed, and this made a man of him. "Now I will relate to you what you wish to know," said the shadow, placing his foot with the polished leather boot as firmly as possible on the arm of the new shadow of the learned man, which lay at his feet like a poodle dog. This was done. It might be from pride, or perhaps that the new shadow might cling to him, but the prostrate shadow remained quite quiet and at rest, in order that it might listen, for it wanted to know how a shadow could be sent away by its master and become a man itself. "Do you know," said the shadow, "that in the house opposite to you lived the most glorious creature in the world? It was poetry. I remained there 3 weeks, and it was more like 3,000 years, for I read all that has ever been written in poetry or prose, and I may say, in truth, that I saw and learnt everything." "Poetry!" exclaimed the learned man. "Yes, she lives as a hermit in great cities. Poetry. Well, I saw her once, for a very short moment. While sleep weighed down my eyelids, she flashed upon me from the balcony like the radiant aurora borealis, surrounded with flowers like flames of fire. Tell me, you were on the balcony that evening. You went through the door, and what did you see?" "I found myself in an anteroom," said the shadow. "You still sat opposite to me, looking into the room. There was no light, or at least it seemed in partial darkness, for the door of a whole suite of rooms stood open, and they were brilliantly lighted. The blaze of light would have killed me had I approached too near the maiden myself, but I was cautious and took time, which is what everyone ought to do." "And what didst thou see?" asked the learned man. "I saw everything, as you shall hear. But it really is not pride on my part, as a free man, and possessing the knowledge that I do, besides my position, not to speak of my wealth. I wish you would say you to me instead of thou." "I beg your pardon," said the learned man. "It is an old habit, which it is difficult to break. You are quite right. I will try to think of it. But now tell me everything that you saw." "Everything," said the shadow, for I saw and know everything. What was the appearance of the inner rooms? Asked the scholar. Was it there like a cool grove, or like a holy temple? Were the chambers like a starry sky seen from the top of a high mountain? It was all that you describe, said the shadow. But I did not go quite in. I remained in the twilight of the anteroom, but I was in a very good position. I could see and hear all that was going on in the court of poetry. But what did you see? Did the gods of ancient times pass through the rooms? Did old heroes fight their battles over again? Were there lovely children at play who related their dreams? I tell you, I have been there, and therefore you may be sure that I saw everything that was to be seen. If you had gone there, you would not have remained a human being, whereas I became one, and at the same moment I became aware of my inner being, my inborn affinity to the nature of poetry. It is true, I did not think much about it while I was with you, but you will remember that I was always much larger at sunrise and sunset, and in the moonlight, even more visible than yourself. But I did not then understand my inner existence. In the anteroom, it was revealed to me. I became a man. I came out in full maturity. But you had left the warm countries. As a man, I felt ashamed to go about without boots or clothes, and that exterior finish by which man is known. So I went my own way. I can tell you, for you will not put it in a book. I hid myself under the cloak of a cake woman. But she little thought who she concealed. It was not till evening that I ventured out. I ran about the streets in the moonlight. I drew myself up to my full height upon the walls, which tickled my back very pleasantly. I ran here and there, looked through the highest windows into the rooms and over the roofs. I looked in and saw what nobody else could see, or indeed ought to see. In fact, it is a bad world, and I would not care to be a man, but that men are of some importance. I saw the most miserable things going on between husbands and wives, parents and children. Sweet, incomparable children. I have seen what no human being has the power of knowing, although they would all be very glad to know the evil conduct of their neighbors. Had I written a newspaper, how eagerly it would have been read. Instead of which, I wrote directly to the persons themselves, and great alarm arose in all the town I visited. They had so much fear of me, and yet how dearly they loved me. The professor made me a professor. The tailor gave me new clothes. I am well provided for in that way. The overseer of the mint struck coins for me. The women declared that I was handsome, and so I became the man you now see me. And now I must say adieu. Here is my card. I live on the sunny side of the street and always stay at home in rainy weather. And the shadow departed. This is all very remarkable, said the learned man. Years passed, days and years went by, and the shadow came again. How are you going on now? He asked. Ah, said the learned man, I am writing about the true, the beautiful, and the good, but no one cares to hear anything about it. I am quite in despair, for I take it to heart very much. That is what I never do, said the shadow. I am growing quite fat and stout, which everyone ought to be. You do not understand the world. You will make yourself ill about it. You ought to travel. I am going on a journey in the summer. Will you go with me? I should like a traveling companion. Will you travel with me as my shadow? It would give me great pleasure, and I will pay all expenses. Are you going to travel far? Asked the learned man. That is a matter of opinion, replied the shadow. At all events, a journey will do you good, and if you will be my shadow, then all your journey shall be paid. It appears to me very absurd, said the learned man. But it is the way of the world, replied the shadow, and always will be. Then he went away. Everything went wrong with the learned man. Sorrow and trouble pursued him, and what he said about the good, the beautiful, and the true was of as much value to most people as a nutmeg would be to a cow. At length, he fell ill. You really look like a shadow, people said to him. And then a cold shudder would pass over him, for he had his own thoughts on the subject. You really ought to go to some watering place, said the shadow on his next visit. There is no other chance for you. I will take you with me for the sake of old acquaintance. I will pay the expenses of your journey, and you shall write a description of it to amuse us, by the way. I should like to go to a watering place. My beard does not grow as it ought, which is from weakness, and I must have a beard. Now do be sensible and accept my proposal. We shall travel as intimate friends. And at last they started together. The shadow was master now, and the master became the shadow. They drove together and rode and walked in company with each other, side by side, or one in front and the other behind, according to the position of the sun. The shadow always knew when to take the place of honor, but the learned man took no notice of it, for he had a good heart and was exceedingly mild and friendly. One day, the master said to the shadow, "We have grown up together from our childhood, and now that we have become traveling companions, shall we not drink to our good fellowship? and say thee and thou to each other? What you say is very straightforward and kindly meant, said the shadow, who was now really master. I will be equally kind and straightforward. You are a learned man and know how wonderful human nature is. There are some men who cannot endure the smell of brown paper. It makes them ill. Others will feel a shuddering sensation to their very marrow if a nail is scratched on a pane of glass. I myself have a similar kind of feeling when I hear anyone say thou to me. I feel crushed by it, as I used to feel in my former position with you. You will perceive that this is a matter of feeling, not pride. I cannot allow you to say thou to me. I will gladly say it to you. And therefore, your wish will be half fulfilled. Then the shadow addressed his former master as thou. It is going rather too far, said the latter, that I am to say you when I speak to him, and he is to say thou to me. However, he was obliged to submit. They arrived at length at the baths, where there were many strangers, and among them a beautiful princess, whose real disease consisted in being too sharp-sighted, which made everyone very uneasy. She saw at once that the newcomer was very different to everyone else. They say he is here to make his beard grow, she thought. But I know the real cause. He is unable to cast a shadow. Then she became very curious on the matter, and one day, while on the promenade, she entered into conversation with the strange gentleman. Being a princess, she was not obliged to stand upon much ceremony. So she said to him without hesitation, "Your illness consists in not being able to cast a shadow. Your Royal Highness must be on the high road to recovery from your illness," said he. "I know your complaint arose from being too sharp-sighted, and in this case, it has entirely failed. I happen to have a most unusual shadow. Have you not seen a person who is always at my side? Persons often give their servants finer cloth for their liveries than for their own clothes, and so I have dressed out my shadow like a man. Nay, you may observe that I have even given him a shadow of his own. It is rather expensive, but I like to have things about me that are peculiar." "How is this?" thought the princess. "Am I really cured? This must be the best watering place in existence. Water in our times has certainly wonderful power. But I will not leave this place yet, just as it begins to be amusing. This foreign prince, for he must be a prince, pleases me above all things. I only hope his beard won't grow, or he will leave at once." In the evening, the princess and the shadow danced together in the large assembly rooms. She was light, but he was lighter still. She had never seen such a dancer before. She told him from what country she had come, and found he knew it and had been there, but not while she was at home. He had looked into the windows of her father's palace, both the upper and the lower windows. He had seen many things, and could therefore answer the princess, and make allusions which quite astonished her. She thought he must be the cleverest man in all the world, and felt the greatest respect for his knowledge. When she danced with him again, she fell in love with him, which the shadow quickly discovered, for she had with her eyes looked him through and through. They danced once more, and she was nearly telling him, but she had some discretion. She thought of her country, her kingdom, and the number of people over whom she would one day have to rule. He is a clever man, she thought to herself, which is a good thing, and he dances admirably, which is also good. But has he well-grounded knowledge? That is an important question, and I must try him. Then she asked him a most difficult question. She herself could not have answered it, and the shadow made a most unaccountable grimace. "You cannot answer that," said the princess. "I learnt something about it in my childhood," he replied, "and believe that even my very shadow, standing over there by the door, could answer it." "Your shadow," said the princess. "Indeed, that would be very remarkable." "I do not say so positively," observed the shadow, "but I am inclined to believe that he can do so. He has followed me for so many years, and has heard so much from me, that I think it is very likely. But your Royal Highness must allow me to observe that he is very proud of being considered a man, and to put him in a good humor, so that he may answer correctly, he must be treated as a man." "I shall be very pleased to do so," said the princess. So she walked up to the learned man, who stood in the doorway, and spoke to him of the sun and the moon, of the green forests, and of people near home and far off. And the learned man conversed with her pleasantly and sensibly. What a wonderful man he must be, to have such a clever shadow, thought she. If I were to choose him, it would be a real blessing to my country and my subjects, and I will do it. So the princess and the shadow were soon engaged to each other, but no one was to be told a word about it till she returned to her kingdom. "No one shall know," said the shadow. "Not even my own shadow." And he had very particular reasons for saying so. After a time, the princess returned to the land over which she reigned, and the shadow accompanied her. "Listen, my friend," said the shadow to the learned man. "Now that I am as fortunate and as powerful as any man can be, I will do something unusually good for you. You shall live in my palace, drive with me in the royal carriage, and have $100,000 a year. But you must allow everyone to call you a shadow, and never venture to say that you have been a man. And once a year, when I sit in my balcony in the sunshine, you must lie at my feet as becomes a shadow to do. For I must tell you, I am going to marry the princess, and our wedding will take place this evening. Now, really, this is too ridiculous, said the learned man. I cannot and will not submit to such folly. It would be cheating the whole country, and the princess also. I will disclose everything and say that I am the man, and that you are only a shadow dressed up in men's clothes. No one would believe you, said the shadow. Be reasonable now, or I will call the guards. I will go straight to the princess, said the learned man. But I shall be there first, replied the shadow, and you will be sent to prison. And so it turned out, for the guards readily obeyed him, as they knew he was going to marry the king's daughter. You tremble, said the princess, when the shadow appeared before her. Has anything happened? You must not be ill today, for this evening our wedding will take place. I have gone through the most terrible affair that could possibly happen, said the shadow. Only imagine, my shadow has gone mad. I suppose such a poor, shallow brain could not bear much. He fancies that he has become a real man, and that I am his shadow. How very terrible, cried the princess. Is he locked up? Oh yes, certainly, for I fear he will never recover. Poor shadow, said the princess. It is very unfortunate for him. It would really be a good deed to free him from his frail existence. And indeed, when I think how often people take the part of the lower class against the higher, in these days, it would be policy to put him out of the way quietly. It is certainly rather hard upon him, for he was a faithful servant, said the shadow, and he pretended to sigh. Yours is a noble character, said the princess, and bowed herself before him. In the evening, the whole town was illuminated, and cannons fired, boom, and the soldiers presented arms. It was indeed a grand wedding. The princess and the shadow stepped out on the balcony to show themselves, and to receive one cheer more. But the learned man heard nothing of all these festivities, for he had already been executed. The old house. A very old house stood once in a street, with several that were quite new and clean. The date of its erection had been carved on one of the beams, and surrounded by scrolls formed of tulips and hop tendrils. By this date, it could be seen that the old house was nearly 300 years old. Verses, too, were written over the windows in old-fashioned letters, and grotesque faces, curiously carved, grinned at you from under the cornices. One story projected a long way over the other, and under the roof ran a leaden gutter with a dragon's head at the end. The rain was intended to pour out at the dragon's mouth, but it ran out of his body instead, for there was a hole in the gutter. The other houses in the street were new and well built, with large window panes and smooth walls. Anyone could see they had nothing to do with the old house. Perhaps they thought, how long will that heap of rubbish remain here to be a disgrace to the whole street? The parapet projects so far forward that no one can see out of our windows what is going on in that direction. The stairs are as broad as the staircase of a castle, and as steep as if they led to a church tower. The iron railing looks like the gate of a cemetery, and there are brass knobs upon it. It is really too ridiculous. Opposite to the old house were more nice new houses, which had just the same opinion as their neighbors. At the window of one of them sat a little boy with fresh, rosy cheeks and clear, sparkling eyes, who was very fond of the old house, in sunshine or in moonlight. He would sit and look at the wall from which the plaster had in some places fallen off, and fancy all sorts of scenes which had been in former times. How the street must have looked when the houses had all gable roofs, open staircases, and gutters with dragons at the spout. He could even see soldiers walking about with halberds. Certainly, it was a very good house to look at for amusement. An old man lived in it, who wore knee breeches, a coat with large brass buttons, and a wig, which anyone could see was a real wig. Every morning, an old man came to clean the rooms and to wait upon him. Otherwise, the old man in the knee breeches would have been quite alone in the house. Sometimes he came to one of the windows and looked out. Then the little boy nodded to him, and the old man nodded back again, till they became acquainted and were friends, although they had never spoken to each other. But that was of no consequence. The little boy one day heard his parents say, "The old man opposite is very well off, but is terribly lonely." The next Sunday morning, the little boy wrapped something in a piece of paper and took it to the door of the old house, and said to the attendant who waited upon the old man, "Will you please give this from me to the gentleman who lives here? I have 2 tin soldiers, and this is one of them, and he shall have it, because I know he is terribly lonely." And the old attendant nodded and looked very pleased. And then he carried the tin soldier into the house. Afterwards, he was sent over to ask the little boy if he would not like to pay a visit himself. His parents gave him permission, and so it was that he gained admission to the old house. The brassy knobs on the railings shone more brightly than ever, as if they had been polished on account of his visit, and on the door were carved trumpeters standing in tulips, and it seemed as if they were blowing with all their might. Their cheeks were so puffed out. Tantarara, the little boy is coming. Tantarara, the little boy is coming. Then the door opened. All round the hall hung old portraits of knights in armor, and ladies in silk gowns, and the armor rattled, and the silk dresses rustled. Then came a staircase which went up a long way, and then came down a little way, and led to a balcony, which was in a very ruinous state. There were large holes and long cracks, out of which grew grass and leaves. Indeed, the whole balcony, the courtyard, and the walls were so overgrown with green that they looked like a garden. In the balcony stood flower pots, on which were heads having asses' ears. But the flowers in them grew just as they pleased. In one pot, pinks were growing all over the sides. At least the green leaves were shooting forth stalk and stem, and saying, as plainly as they could speak, "The air has fanned me, the sun has kissed me, and I am promised a little flower for next Sunday. Really, for next Sunday." Then they entered a room in which the walls were covered with leather, and the leather had golden flowers stamped upon it. "Gilding will fade in damp weather. To endure, there is nothing like leather," said the walls. Chairs handsomely carved, with elbows on each side, and with very high backs, stood in the room. And as they creaked, they seemed to say, "Sit down. Oh dear, how I am creaking. I shall certainly have the gout like the old cupboard. Gout in my back. Ugh." And then the little boy entered the room where the old man sat. "Thank you for the tin soldier, my little friend," said the old man. "And thank you also for coming to see me." "Thanks, thanks," or "creak, creak," said all the furniture. There was so much that the pieces of furniture stood in each other's way to get a sight of the little boy. On the wall near the center of the room hung the picture of a beautiful lady, young and gay, dressed in the fashion of the olden times, with powdered hair and a full, stiff skirt. She said neither thanks nor creak, but she looked down upon the little boy with her mild eyes. And then he said to the old man, "Where did you get that picture?" "From the shop opposite," he replied. "Many portraits hang there that none seem to trouble themselves about. The persons they represent have been dead and buried long since. But I knew this lady many years ago, and she has been dead nearly half a century. Under a glass beneath the picture hung a nosegay of withered flowers, which were no doubt half a century old too. At least they appeared so. and the pendulum of the old clock went to and fro, and the hands turned round. And as time passed on, everything in the room grew older, but no one seemed to notice it. "They say at home," said the little boy, "that you are very lonely." "Oh," replied the old man, "I have pleasant thoughts of all that has passed, recalled by memory. And now you are come to visit me, and that is very pleasant." Then he took from the bookcase a book full of pictures representing long processions of wonderful coaches, such as are never seen at the present time. Soldiers like the knave of clubs, and citizens with waving banners. The tailors had a flag with a pair of scissors supported by 2 lions, and on the shoemaker's flag there were not boots, but an eagle with 2 heads. For the shoemakers must have everything arranged so that they can say, "This is a pair." What a picture book it was. And then the old man went into another room to fetch apples and nuts. It was very pleasant, certainly, to be in that old house. "I cannot endure it," said the tin soldier, who stood on a shelf. "It is so lonely and dull here. I have been accustomed to live in a family, and I cannot get used to this life. I cannot bear it. The whole day is long enough, but the evening is longer. It is not here like it was in your house opposite, when your father and mother talked so cheerfully together, while you and all the dear children made such a delightful noise. No, it is all lonely in the old man's house. Do you think he gets any kisses? Do you think he ever has friendly looks or a Christmas tree? He will have nothing now but the grave. Oh, I cannot bear it. You must not look only on the sorrowful side," said the little boy. "I think everything in this house is beautiful, and all the old pleasant thoughts come back here to pay visits." "Ah, but I never see any, and I don't know them," said the tin soldier, "and I cannot bear it." "You must bear it," said the little boy. Then the old man came back with a pleasant face and brought with him beautiful preserved fruits, as well as apples and nuts. And the little boy thought no more of the tin soldier. How happy and delighted the little boy was. And after he returned home, and while days and weeks passed, a great deal of nodding took place from one house to the other. And then the little boy went to pay another visit. The carved trumpeters blew tantarara. There is the little boy. Tantarara. The swords and armor on the old knight's pictures rattled. The silk dresses rustled. The leather repeated its rhyme, and the old chairs had the gout in their backs and cried, "Creak." It was all exactly like the first time, for in that house, one day and 1 hour were just like another. "I cannot bear it any longer," said the tin soldier. "I have wept tears of tin. It is so melancholy here. Let me go to the wars and lose an arm or a leg. That would be some change. I cannot bear it. Now I know what it is to have visits from one's old recollections and all they bring with them. I have had visits from mine, and you may believe me, it is not altogether pleasant. I was very nearly jumping from the shelf. I saw you all in your house opposite, as if you were really present. It was Sunday morning, and you children stood round the table, singing the hymn that you sing every morning. You were standing quietly, with your hands folded, and your father and mother. You were standing quietly, with your hands folded, and your father and mother were looking just as serious when the door opened, and your little sister Maria, who is not 2 years old, was brought into the room. You know she always dances when she hears music and singing of any sort, so she began to dance immediately, although she ought not to have done so. But she could not get into the right time because the tune was so slow. So she stood first on one leg and then on the other, and bent her head very low. But it would not suit the music. You all stood looking very grave, although it was very difficult to do so. But I laughed so to myself that I fell down from the table and got a bruise, which is there still. I know it was not right to laugh, so all this and everything else that I have seen keeps running in my head, and these must be the old recollections that bring so many thoughts with them. Tell me whether you still sing on Sundays, and tell me about your little sister Maria, and how my old comrade is, the other tin soldier. Really he must be very happy. I cannot endure this life. You are given away, said the little boy. You must stay. Don't you see that? Then the old man came in, with a box containing many curious things to show him. Rouge pots, scent boxes, and old cards, so large and so richly gilded that none are ever seen like them in these days. And there were smaller boxes to look at, and the piano was opened, and inside the lid were painted landscapes. But when the old man played, the piano sounded quite out of tune. Then he looked at the picture he had bought at the broker's, and his eyes sparkled brightly as he nodded at it, and said, "Ah, she could sing that tune. I will go to the wars. I will go to the wars," cried the tin soldier as loud as he could, and threw himself down on the floor. Where could he have fallen? The old man searched, and the little boy searched, but he was gone and could not be found. "I shall find him again," said the old man. But he did not find him. The boards of the floor were open and full of holes. The tin soldier had fallen through a crack between the boards. and lay there now in an open grave. The day went by, and the little boy returned home. The week passed, and many more weeks. It was winter, and the windows were quite frozen, so the little boy was obliged to breathe on the panes and rub a hole to peep through at the old house. Snow drifts were lying in all the scrolls and on the inscriptions, and the steps were covered with snow, as if no one were at home. And indeed, nobody was home, for the old man was dead. In the evening, a hearse stopped at the door, and the old man in his coffin was placed in it. He was to be taken to the country, to be buried there in his own grave. So they carried him away. No one followed him, for all his friends were dead. And the little boy kissed his hand to the coffin as the hearse moved away with it. A few days after, there was an auction at the old house, and from his window, the little boy saw the people carrying away the pictures of old knights and ladies, the flower pots with the long ears, the old chairs, and the cupboards. Some were taken one way, some another. Her portrait, which had been bought at the picture dealer's, went back again to his shop, and there it remained, for no one seemed to know her or to care for the old picture. In the spring, they began to pull the house itself down. People called it complete rubbish. From the street could be seen the room in which the walls were covered with leather, ragged and torn, and the green in the balcony hung straggling over the beams. They pulled it down quickly, for it looked ready to fall, and at last it was cleared away altogether. "What a good riddance," said the neighbors' houses. Very shortly, a fine new house was built farther back from the road. It had lofty windows and smooth walls, but in front, on the spot where the old house really stood, a little garden was planted, and wild vines grew up over the neighboring walls. In front of the garden were large iron railings and a great gate which looked very stately. People used to stop and peep through the railings. The sparrows assembled in dozens upon the wild vines and chattered all together as loud as they could, but not about the old house. None of them could remember it, for many years had passed by, so many indeed, that the little boy was now a man, and a really good man too, and his parents were very proud of him. He was just married and had come with his young wife to reside in the new house with the garden in front of it. And now he stood there by her side while she planted a field flower that she thought very pretty. She was planting it herself with her little hands and pressing down the earth with her fingers. "Oh, dear, what was that?" she exclaimed, as something pricked her. Out of the soft earth, something was sticking up. It was only think. It was really the tin soldier, the very same which had been lost up in the old man's room. and had been hidden among old wood and rubbish for a long time, till it sunk into the earth, where it must have been for many years. And the young wife wiped the soldier, first with a green leaf, and then with her fine pocket handkerchief that smelt of such beautiful perfume. And the tin soldier felt as if he was recovering from a fainting fit. "Let me see him," said the young man. And then he smiled and shook his head and said, "It can scarcely be the same, but it reminds me of something that happened to one of my tin soldiers when I was a little boy." And then he told his wife about the old house and the old man, and of the tin soldier which he had sent across, because he thought the old man was lonely. And he related the story so clearly that tears came into the eyes of the young wife for the old house and the old man. "It is very likely that this is really the same soldier," said she, "and I will take care of him and always remember what you have told me. But someday you must show me the old man's grave." "I don't know where it is," he replied. "No one knows. All his friends are dead. No one took care of him. And I was only a little boy. Oh, how dreadfully lonely he must have been," said she. "Yes, terribly lonely," cried the tin soldier. "Still, it is delightful, not to be forgotten." "Delightful indeed," cried a voice quite near to them. No one but the tin soldier saw that it came from a rag of the leather which hung in tatters. It had lost all its gilding and looked like wet earth, but it had an opinion, and it spoke it thus: "Gilding will fade in damp weather. To endure, there is nothing like leather." But the tin soldier did not believe any such thing. The drop of water. Of course you know what a magnifying glass is. One of those little round lenses that makes every tiny thing look 100 times bigger than it truly is. Through it, a crumb becomes a mountain, a hair, a tree trunk, and a drop of pond water, a whole universe. When a person holds such a glass to his eye and gazes upon that small, glistening bead drawn from the still pond by the meadow, he will see, if he has any patience, 1,000 marvelous beings swimming and tumbling about, creatures invisible to the naked sight, yet as real as you or I. They dart and whirl and twist in wild delight. They chase one another and seize one another. They dance their little dances and fight their little wars. Some devour, some flee, some cling together in clusters like merry children at play. It almost looks like a crowded marketplace of spiders, all leaping and tumbling about in confusion, fierce yet strangely joyful in their own busy way. Now, in a small crooked hut at the edge of the village, lived an old man whom everyone called Cribble. Crabble. And truly, that was his name. He was a curious soul, greedy for wonders, and always longing for the best of everything. If he could not gain what he wanted by ordinary means, then he would gain it by magic, for he was well versed in the dark and glittering arts that twist nature to one's desire. He owned old books bound in skin, bottles filled with murmuring liquids, and boxes that never opened the same way twice. Yet of all his possessions, his most beloved was a simple thing, a magnifying glass, clear as ice and set in brass, through which he believed the secrets of the world could be read like writing upon glass. One afternoon, while the wind whispered over the reeds, Cribble Crabble sat by his window and held the lens to his eye. He had scooped a drop of water from a muddy puddle near the ditch, a common drop, brownish and dull to anyone else. But when he raised it beneath his glass, he gasped aloud. What a cribbling and crabbling there was within. Thousands of tiny beings sprang and tumbled, seized and bit and swallowed each other whole. It was a frenzy of life and hunger. "Horrible!" cried the old man, his gray brows knitting. "Such cruelty! Can they not be persuaded to live in peace and quietness, each tending his own little affairs without trampling his neighbor?" He pondered long over this, drumming his fingers upon the table, but no peaceful plan would do. At last, he muttered, "If I am to understand them, they must be made clearer to my sight. Perhaps a touch of color will reveal their nature." So he reached for a small vial that glowed faintly in the dusk. Into the droplet of water, he let fall a single ruby-red bead of liquid. It was not wine, as it appeared, but witch's blood drawn from the lobes of the ear. Finest quality, 9 pence a drop, and dangerous to waste. The moment it touched the water, the whole tiny world blushed pink. Now the creatures shone like naked little men and women, rushing through the rosy light. It looked indeed like an entire city of wild folk stripped bare to the skin. Just then, another magician passed by, an odd fellow, ancient as the hills, and so secret that no one had ever given him a name. He was simply called the Nameless One, and that was perhaps the best thing about him. "What curiosity have you caught there, Cribble Crabble?" he asked, peering with eyes as sharp as needles. "If you can guess," said Cribble Crabble, chuckling, "I'll make you a gift of it." "That is easily said," replied the Nameless One, "but not so easily done." He took up the magnifying glass and bent close. Through the lens, he saw what seemed to be a vast city, alive with countless naked beings, streets of movement, squares of struggle, alleys of noise and dust, everywhere quarrel and uproar. It was terrible to watch, One creature clawed another. One was dragged down as another climbed up. Teeth flashed, limbs tangled. The stronger trampled the weak. The quick outwitted the slow. "Look there," cried one little man. "His leg is longer than mine. Away with it." Another jeered, "That one bears a bruise. It must pain him. Let it pain him more." They swarmed upon the wounded one, tore and bit, and devoured him. And see, over there sat a gentle creature, quiet as a maiden, wishing only for peace. Yet even she was not spared. They pulled her hair, dragged her to the center, and tore her apart with laughter. The nameless one lowered the glass and gave a dry little laugh. "That is a merry sight," said he. "Indeed," said Cribble Crabble. "But can you tell me what it is?" "Why, surely that is plain enough," said the other. "It is Paris, or London, or any great city of men, for they are all the same. See how they scramble and bite, how they envy and destroy one another. A great city, indeed." Cribble Crabble leaned back and chuckled till the tears ran down his cheeks. "A city?" he said at last. "You are mistaken, friend. It is nothing more than a drop of puddle water." The nameless one smiled faintly, but whether in scorn or sorrow, none could tell. "Then your puddle is wiser than most men," he said, and went his way, leaving Cribble Crabble to stare once more into the little red world that boiled and shimmered under his glass, a tiny mirror of all mankind. The happy family. The largest green leaf in this country is certainly the burdock leaf. If you hold it in front of you, it is large enough for an apron, and if you hold it over your head, it is almost as good as an umbrella. It is so wonderfully large. A burdock never grows alone. Where it grows, there are many more, and it is a splendid sight. And all this splendor is good for snails. The great white snails, which grand people in olden times used to have made into fricassees. And when they had eaten them, they would say, "Oh, what a delicious dish." For these people really thought them good, and these snails lived on burdock leaves, and for them, the burdock was planted. There was once an old estate where no one now lived to require snails. Indeed, the owners had all died out, but the burdock still flourished. It grew over all the beds and walks of the garden. Its growth had no check, till it became at last quite a forest of burdocks. Here and there stood an apple or a plum tree. But for this, nobody would have thought the place had ever been a garden. It was burdock from one end to the other. And here lived the last two surviving snails. They knew not themselves how old they were, but they could remember the time when there were a great many more of them, and that they were descended from a family which came from foreign lands, and that the whole forest had been planted for them and theirs. They had never been away from the garden, but they knew that another place once existed in the world, called the Duke's Palace Castle, in which some of their relations had been boiled till they became black, and were then laid on a silver dish. But what was done afterwards, they did not know. Besides, they could not imagine exactly how it felt to be boiled and placed on a silver dish, but no doubt it was something very fine and highly genteel. Neither the cockchafer, nor the toad, nor the earthworm, whom they questioned about it, would give them the least information. For none of their relations had ever been cooked or served on a silver dish. The old white snails were the most aristocratic race in the world. They knew that. The forest had been planted for them, and the nobleman's castle had been built entirely that they might be cooked and laid on silver dishes. They lived quite retired and very happily, and as they had no children of their own, they had adopted a little common snail, which they brought up as their own child. The little one would not grow, for he was only a common snail. But the old people, particularly the mother snail, declared that she could easily see how he grew. And when the father said he could not perceive it, she begged him to feel the little snail's shell, and he did so, and found that the mother was right. One day, it rained very fast. Listen, what a drumming there is on the burdock leaves. Turn, 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 said the father snail. There come the drops, said the mother. They are trickling down the stalks. We shall have it very wet here presently. I am very glad we have such good houses, and that the little one has one of his own. There has been really more done for us than for any other creature. It is quite plain that we are the most noble people in the world. We have houses from our birth, and the burdock forest has been planted for us. I should very much like to know how far it extends, and what lies beyond it. There can be nothing better than we have here, said the father snail. I wish for nothing more. Yes, but I do, said the mother. I should like to be taken to the palace, and boiled, and laid upon a silver dish, as was done to all our ancestors. And you may be sure it must be something very uncommon, sir. The nobleman's castle, perhaps, has fallen to decay, said the snail father. Or the burdock wood may have grown out. You need not be in a hurry. You are always so impatient. And the youngster is getting just the same. He has been 3 days creeping to the top of that stalk. I feel quite giddy when I look at him. You must not scold him, said the mother snail. He creeps so very carefully. he will be the joy of our home, and we old folks have nothing else to live for. But have you ever thought where we are to get a wife for him? Do you think that farther out in the wood there may be others of our race? There may be black snails, no doubt, said the old snail. Black snails without houses, but they are so vulgar and conceited too. But we can give the ants a commission. They run here and there, as if they all had so much business to get through. They, most likely, will know of a wife for our youngster. I certainly know a most beautiful bride, said one of the ants, but I fear it would not do, for she is a queen. That does not matter, said the old snail. Has she a house? She has a palace, replied the ant, a most beautiful ant palace with 700 passages. Thank you, said the mother snail, but our boy shall not go to live in an ant hill. If you know of nothing better, we will give the commission to the white gnats. They fly about in rain and sunshine. They know the burdock wood from one end to the other. We have a wife for him, said the gnats. 100 man steps from here, there is a little snail with a house sitting on a gooseberry bush. She is quite alone and old enough to be married. It is only 100 man steps from here. Then let her come to him, said the old people. He has the whole burdock forest. She has only a bush. So they brought the little lady snail. She took 8 days to perform the journey. But that was just as it ought to be, for it showed her to be one of the right breeding. And then they had a wedding. 6 glowworms gave as much light as they could. But in other respects, it was all very quiet. For the old snails could not bear festivities or a crowd. But a beautiful speech was made by the mother snail. The father could not speak. He was too much overcome. Then they gave the whole burdock forest to the young snails as an inheritance, and repeated what they had so often said, that it was the finest place in the world, and that if they led upright and honorable lives, and their family increased, they and their children might someday be taken to the nobleman's palace to be boiled black and laid on a silver dish. And when they had finished speaking, the old couple crept into their houses and came out no more, for they slept. The young snail pair now ruled in the forest and had a numerous progeny. But as the young ones were never boiled or laid in silver dishes, they concluded that the castle had fallen into decay, and that all the people in the world were dead. And as nobody contradicted them, they thought they must be right. And the rain fell upon the burdock leaves to play the drum for them, and the sun shone to paint colors on the burdock forest for them, and they were very happy. The whole family were entirely and perfectly happy. The story of a mother A mother sat by her little child. She was very sad, for she feared it would die. It was quite pale, and its little eyes were closed. And sometimes it drew a heavy, deep breath, almost like a sigh. And then the mother gazed more sadly than ever on the poor little creature. Someone knocked at the door, and a poor old man walked in. He was wrapped in something that looked like a great horse cloth, and he required it truly to keep him warm, for it was cold winter. The country everywhere lay covered with snow and ice, and the wind blew so sharply that it cut one's face. The little child had dozed off to sleep for a moment, and the mother, seeing that the old man shivered with the cold, rose and placed a small mug of beer on the stove to warm for him. The old man sat and rocked the cradle, and the mother seated herself on a chair near him and looked at her sick child, who still breathed heavily, and took hold of its little hand. "You think I shall keep him, do you not?" she said. "Our all-merciful God will surely not take him away from me." The old man, who was indeed Death himself, nodded his head in a peculiar manner, which might have signified either yes or no. And the mother cast down her eyes, while the tears rolled down her cheeks. Then her head became heavy, for she had not closed her eyes for 3 days and nights. And she slept, but only for a moment. Shivering with cold, she started up and looked round the room. The old man was gone, and her child, it was gone too. The old man had taken it with him. In the corner of the room, the old clock began to strike. Whir went the chains. The heavy weight sank to the ground, and the clock stopped. And the poor mother rushed out of the house, calling for her child. Out in the snow sat a woman in long black garments, and she said to the mother, "Death has been with you in your room. I saw him hastening away with your little child. He strides faster than the wind, and never brings back what he has taken away. Only tell me which way he has gone," said the mother. "Tell me the way. I will find him." "I know the way," said the woman in the black garments. "But before I tell you, you must sing to me all the songs that you have sung to your child. I love these songs. I have heard them before. I am Night, and I saw your tears flow as you sang. I will sing them all to you," said the mother. "But do not detain me now. I must overtake him and find my child." But Night sat silent and still. Then the mother wept and sang and wrung her hands. And there were many songs, and yet even more tears, till at length Night said, "Go to the right, into the dark forest of fir trees. For I saw Death take that road with your little child." Within the wood, the mother came to crossroads, and she knew not which to take. Just by stood a thorn bush. It had neither leaf nor flower, for it was the cold winter time, and icicles hung on the branches. "Have you not seen death go by with my little child?" she asked. "Yes," replied the thorn bush, "but I will not tell you which way he has taken until you have warmed me in your bosom. I am freezing to death here and turning to ice." Then she pressed the bramble to her bosom quite close so that it might be thawed, and the thorns pierced her flesh, and great drops of blood flowed. But the bramble shot forth fresh green leaves, and they became flowers on the cold winter's night. So warm is the heart of a sorrowing mother. Then the bramble bush told her the path she must take. She came at length to a great lake on which there was neither ship nor boat to be seen. The lake was not frozen sufficiently for her to pass over on the ice, nor was it open enough for her to wade through. And yet she must cross it if she wished to find her child. Then she laid herself down to drink up the water of the lake, which was, of course, impossible for any human being to do. But the bereaved mother thought that perhaps a miracle might take place to help her. "You will never succeed in this," said the lake. "Let us make an agreement together which will be better. I love to collect pearls, and your eyes are the purest I have ever seen. If you will weep those eyes away in tears into my waters, then I will take you to the large hothouse where death dwells and rears flowers and trees, every one of which is a human life. Oh, what would I not give to reach my child?" said the weeping mother. And as she still continued to weep, her eyes fell into the depths of the lake and became 2 costly pearls. Then the lake lifted her up and wafted her across to the opposite shore as if she were on a swing, where stood a wonderful building many miles in length. No one could tell whether it was a mountain covered with forests and full of caves, or whether it had been built. But the poor mother could not see, for she had wept her eyes into the lake. "Where shall I find Death, who went away with my little child?" she asked. "He has not arrived here yet," said an old gray-haired woman who was walking about and watering Death's hothouse. "How have you found your way here? And who helped you?" "God has helped me," she replied. "He is merciful. Will you not be merciful too? Where shall I find my little child?" "I did not know the child," said the old woman. "And you are blind. Many flowers and trees have faded tonight, and death will soon come to transplant them. You know already that every human being has a life tree or a life flower, just as may be ordained for him. They look like other plants, but they have hearts that beat. Children's hearts also beat. From that, You may perhaps be able to recognize your child, but what will you give me? If I tell you what more you will have to do." "I have nothing to give," said the afflicted mother, "but I would go to the ends of the earth for you." "I can give you nothing to do for me there," said the old woman, "but you can give me your long black hair. You know yourself that it is beautiful, and it pleases me. You can take my white hair in exchange, which will be something in return." "Do you ask nothing more than that?" said she. "I will give it to you with pleasure." And she gave up her beautiful hair and received in return the white locks of the old woman. Then they went into Death's vast hothouse, where flowers and trees grew together in wonderful profusion. Blooming hyacinths under glass bells and peonies like strong trees. There grew water plants, some quite fresh, and others looking sickly, which had water snakes twining round them, and black crabs clinging to their stems. There stood noble palm trees, oaks, and plantains, and beneath them bloomed thyme and parsley. Each tree and flower had a name. Each represented a human life and belonged to men still living. Some in China, others in Greenland, and in all parts of the world. Some large trees had been planted in little pots so that they were cramped for room, and seemed about to burst the pot to pieces, while many weak little flowers were growing in rich soil, with moss all around them, carefully tended and cared for. The sorrowing mother bent over the little plants and heard the human heart beating in each, and recognized the beatings of her child's heart among millions of others. "That is it," she cried, stretching out her hand towards a little crocus flower which hung down its sickly head. "Do not touch the flower," exclaimed the old woman, "but place yourself here, and when death comes, I expect him every minute. Do not let him pull up that plant, but threaten him that if he does, you will serve the other flowers in the same manner. This will make him afraid, for he must account to God for each of them. None can be uprooted unless he receives permission to do so." There rushed through the hothouse a chill of icy coldness, and the blind mother felt that death had arrived. "How did you find your way hither?" asked he. "How could you come here faster than I have?" "I am a mother," she answered. And Death stretched out his hand towards the delicate little flower, but she held her hands tightly round it, and held it fast at same time with the most anxious care, lest she should touch one of the leaves. Then Death breathed upon her hands, and she felt his breath colder than the icy wind, and her hands sank down powerless. "You cannot prevail against me," said Death. "But a God of mercy can," said she. "I only do his will," replied Death. "I am his gardener. I take all his flowers and trees and transplant them into the gardens of paradise in an unknown land. How they flourish there, and what that garden resembles, I may not tell you. "Give me back my child," said the mother, weeping and imploring, and she seized 2 beautiful flowers in her hands and cried to Death, "I will tear up all your flowers, for I am in despair." "Do not touch them," said Death. "You say you are unhappy. And would you make another mother as unhappy as yourself?" "Another mother," cried the poor woman, setting the flowers free from her hands. "There are your eyes," said Death. "I fished them up out of the lake for you. They were shining brightly, but I knew not they were yours. Take them back. They are clearer now than before. And then look into the deep well, which is close by here. I will tell you the names of the 2 flowers which you wished to pull up, and you will see the whole future of the human beings they represent, and what you were about to frustrate and destroy." Then she looked into the well, and it was a glorious sight to behold how one of them became a blessing to the world, and how much happiness and joy it spread around. But she saw that the life of the other was full of care and poverty, misery and woe. "Both are the will of God," said Death. "Which is the unhappy flower, and which is the blessed one?" she said. "That I may not tell you," said Death. "But thus far you may learn that one of the 2 flowers represents your own child. It was the fate of your child that you saw, the future of your own child." Then the mother screamed aloud with terror, "Which of them belongs to my child? Tell me that. Deliver the unhappy child. Release it from so much misery. Rather, take it away. Take it to the kingdom of God. Forget my tears and my entreaties. Forget all that I have said or done." "I do not understand you," said Death. "Will you have your child back? Or shall I carry him away to a place that you do not know?" Then the mother wrung her hands, fell on her knees, and prayed to God, "Grant not my prayers when they are contrary to thy will, which at all times must be the best. Oh, hear them not." And her head sank on her bosom. Then Death carried away her child to the unknown land.